The morning broke slow and hazy, the kind of dawn that hung heavy with dew and silence. Out here on the edge of Elkhorn County, the land stretched wide, untamed, and stubborn. My ranch sat like an island in a sea of rolling hills, barbed wire fences stretching to the horizon. I'd built this place from the ground up, every fence post sunk by my own hands, every plank of the barn hammered in under a Texas sun that burned hotter than a forge. And that gate, the gate was supposed to stand as a line. A line between my land and the world outside. But some people don't respect lines. I knew something was wrong before I even saw it. The rumble of tires on gravel reached my ears, sharper than the morning bird song, wrong in rhythm. I froze on the porch, coffee cup halfway to my lips, listening. My dogs stirred, ears pricking up, a low growl humming in their throats. Then it came, the screech of bending steel. I dropped the mug, glass shattering against the planks, and stormed down the steps, my boots hitting hard like gunfire. Dust swirled up around my ankles as I jogged the dirt path that led to my gate. And there it was, leaning sideways like a drunk, the heavy metal frame twisted off its hinges. Steel chain links dragged across the ground, mangled and useless. And cutting across my pasture, right through the tall grass I'd seeded last spring, was a fresh pair of tire tracks, deep, arrogant gouges torn into the earth. I knew damn well whose they were before I even saw the glint of that white Lexus at the far end of the field. Karen Dalton. She slowed only when she reached the far fence line, easing her SUV into a wide circle like she owned the place. When the dust cloud settled, she stepped out, heels clicking against dry earth as if she were strolling through a shopping mall instead of my ranch. Oversized sunglasses hid her eyes, and a strand of pearls gleamed at her throat, an oddity against the backdrop of weathered wood and rusting metal. "Morning, Mr. Garrison," she called out cheerfully, like we were meeting for brunch. I tightened my grip on the shotgun slung across my shoulder. Not to use, never to use, but to remind both of us this wasn't suburbia. This was ranch country. "Karen," I barked. "You just drove through my damn gate." She waved dismissively, flashing teeth in a smile that looked painted on. "Oh, that? It's just a gate. And honestly, you should consider leaving that road open. Some of us have places to be, and your land is the quickest way to the highway. Saves me 10 minutes every morning." Every word dripped with entitlement, like she was doing me a favor by explaining herself. My jaw clenched, heat rising behind my eyes. "This is private land," I said, every syllable edged like barbed wire. "My land. You don't have the right to drive through it." Her lips curved higher, smug now, amused by my anger. "Well, maybe if you joined the homeowners association, we could work something out. We've discussed it at meetings, you know. How convenient it would be if this road were accessible." That word, accessible, burned hotter than a coal in my chest. She didn't see a ranch built on blood, sweat, and sun-scorched years. She saw a shortcut. I stepped closer, dust crunching under my boots. The dogs padded behind me, low growls vibrating in their throats. "You ever drive through my gate again, Karen, I swear to God." Her smile faltered, just a flicker, like a mask slipping. Then she adjusted her sunglasses, as if the gesture erased the moment. "You should calm down," she said softly. "Getting worked up isn't good for a man your age." I stared at her, feeling the silence stretch taut between us. The sun climbed higher, glinting off her Lexus, off the sweat starting to bead on my temple. She was testing me, pressing every button she could. And she thought she could win. With a shake of her head, she turned back to her SUV, heels stabbing little holes in my dirt as she walked. "Don't say I didn't warn you, Mr. Garrison. You'll find it's better for everyone if you cooperate with the HOA." She climbed in, slammed the door, and gunned the engine. Gravel sprayed out like shrapnel as she sped toward the far fence line, the sound of her tires grinding against my land echoing long after she vanished. I stood there a long while, the wind stirring the tall grass around me, watching the mangled gate sway like a wounded thing. My chest heaved with every breath, my fists so tight the knuckles whitened. It wasn't just a gate. It was my line. My boundary. My right to say where the world ended and my home began. And she had shattered it. I walked back to the gate, running my hands over the bent steel, the broken welds. This wasn't the first time, 3 gates in 3 months. And every time I fixed it, every time I tried to reclaim that line, she smashed right through, laughing from behind tinted glass. I could already hear the voices in town if I reported it again. Sheriff Barnes would sigh, say his hands were tied unless I caught her in the act. The HOA board would scoff, calling me difficult, unneighborly. Folks in town would shake their heads and mutter about that crazy old rancher who can't get along with the new subdivision. No. Reporting her wouldn't change a damn thing. But I could. That night, when the cicadas buzzed loud and the coyotes howled at the edge of the fields, I worked under the beam of a halogen lamp. Sparks flew as I welded steel back into place, sweat running down my face, the smell of molten iron thick in the air. My hands moved steady, sure, every clang of the hammer ringing with the same thought. Enough. Karen Dalton thought she was untouchable. Thought her HOA gave her the right to trample over me, over my land, over the life I'd built. But she was wrong. Out here, past the city limits, past the reach of boardrooms and bylaws, there were rules older and harsher than anything she understood. And I was about to remind her. I shut off the welder, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and looked at the gate standing tall again. Stronger. Ready. A storm was coming, and she didn't even see the thunderheads building on the horizon. By the time the first lightning struck, she'd know. She'd know this ranch wasn't hers to conquer. And she'd never see the trap until it was too late. The idea came to me slow, like a seed taking root. For 3 nights after Karen Dalton's little joyride, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the ranch, the rustle of coyotes in the tree line, the groan of the barn settling into the earth, the restless shuffle of cattle in the fields. My body begged for rest, but my mind replayed the scene of her Lexus smashing against the gate over and over, her smug grin flashing behind tinted glass. She thought this was over. That I'd weld the steel back together like I always did, grumble into my coffee, and let it slide. But she didn't know me. I was born on this land. My father before me, his father before him. The Garrison Ranch had survived drought, fire, and hard men with harder intentions. We'd buried thieves, run off squatters, and fought tooth and nail to keep every acre. If Karen Dalton thought she could take what wasn't hers, she was about to learn that a rancher's patience runs deep, but not endless. By the 4th night, I knew what I had to do. I started at the gate. Not just repairing it, but rebuilding it into something no suburban SUV could ram through. I cut fresh steel beams with the grinder, the shriek of the blade tearing through the night. Sparks lit up the dark like fireflies, and sweat stung my eyes under the halogen work light. This time I didn't just weld joints, I sank new posts 6 feet into concrete, poured with a wheelbarrow in the dead of night. The posts stood like sentries, immovable, waiting for a challenge. The crossbeam wasn't just welded, it was chained and locked, reinforced with more steel than any man had a right to put into a gate. When it was done, I leaned against the fence post and studied my work. If Karen tried to smash through this one, she'd think she'd hit a brick wall. But the gate wasn't the point. It was the bait. The real trap lay just beyond. I paced the dirt track where her Lexus had carved its shortcut. My boots kicked at the gravel, scattering stones across the surface. This path was her lifeline, her shortcut to convenience. She'd see the new gate, maybe laugh, maybe curse, and then she'd do what she always did, gun the engine and charge through like she owned the world. But this time, I'd be waiting for her. I worked the next 2 days in secret, digging shallow trenches into the packed dirt with a steel spade and a backhoe I'd borrowed from my neighbor Earl. Every shovel of earth was a reminder, she had brought this on herself. From my shed, I hauled out scrap iron I'd saved from years of repairs, steel rods, broken plow teeth, sharp-edged fragments too stubborn to throw away. With the grinder, I cut each piece into jagged triangles, each point sharp enough to puncture a tractor tire. When the sun went down, I welded the pieces to flat iron strips, row after row of vicious teeth, and bolted them to heavy beams. They weren't just spikes, they were predators, waiting beneath the dirt for rubber and steel to come rolling over them. The next morning, I laid the strips in the trenches, careful and precise, like setting a snare for coyotes. A thin layer of gravel disguised everything. To the naked eye, the road looked the same as it always had, worn, dusty, harmless. But underneath, it was death for any tire foolish enough to test it. By the time I finished, sweat plastered my shirt to my back, and my muscles screamed from the labor. I stood there in the heat of the afternoon sun, looking at the gate, looking at the road beyond, and I knew one thing: if she came again, she wouldn't get far. I'd sprung plenty of traps in my day. Snares for rabbits. Cages for foxes. Traps don't kill right away. They stop the animal cold, hold it in place, force it to reckon with what it's done. That's what this was. Not revenge. Not cruelty. A reckoning. 2 days passed without a sign of her. I went about the chores, mending fences, feeding cattle, fixing the tractor's busted radiator. But my ears were tuned to the distance, listening. Every engine that rolled by on County Road 12 made me pause mid-swing of the hammer, mid-pour of the feed bucket. The first morning, it was just a neighbor's pickup, hauling hay bales. The second morning, the mailman's Jeep rattled past, dust trailing behind. By the third morning, I'd almost convinced myself maybe she'd learned her lesson. Maybe the sight of the reinforced gate had spooked her off. But then I heard it, the high-pitched whine of a Lexus engine, pushed harder than it was ever built to go. I froze. The sound grew louder, cresting the hill. Dust plumed on the horizon, curling into the sky. I set down my coffee and walked onto the porch, the boards creaking under my boots. From there, I had a clear line of sight to the gate. My dogs perked up, ears standing tall, growls rumbling low in their throats. Then she came into view. The white Lexus gleamed in the morning sun, cutting across the dirt road like a shark through water. Karen Dalton's face was just visible behind the windshield, lips pursed, sunglasses flashing. She didn't slow down. The gate shuddered when she hit it. Steel clanged against steel, the impact echoing across the pasture. But it didn't give. Not an inch. She backed up, tires spitting gravel, then slammed forward again. Still nothing. I almost smiled. And then the trap sprung. Her front tires screamed as they met the hidden spikes. The sound was violent, a sharp, ripping hiss, followed by a dull thump as rubber shredded and steel tore. The Lexus lurched, nose-diving as both front tires collapsed at once. Karen's eyes went wide. She tried to swerve, but the back wheels rolled right over the second strip. Another hiss, another collapse. In less than 10 feet, the car was dead. For flat tires, rims grinding against gravel, engine whimpering like a wounded animal. Karen slammed the brakes and flung the door open. She stumbled out, heels sinking into the dirt, her face pale beneath the expensive makeup. You maniac," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me across the pasture. "What have you done?" I stepped down off the porch, slow and deliberate, the shotgun resting across my shoulder. My boots crunched against the gravel as I walked toward her. The dogs flanked me, silent shadows, eyes fixed on the intruder. Karen's chest heaved, rage mixing with fear. She glanced at her Lexus, sagging low on its rims, then back at me. "This is illegal. You'll pay for this. Do you know who I am?" I stopped a few feet away, meeting her eyes with a calm that burned hotter than anger. "No, Karen," I said. "You're the one who's gonna pay." Her bravado cracked. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so badly it slipped from her grip and landed in the dirt. She stared at it, then at me, as if realizing for the first time that the world beyond her HOA didn't protect her here. Her sunglasses couldn't hide the truth anymore. Fear had taken root, deep and real. The Lexus was trapped. She was trapped. And for the first time, Karen Dalton knew she wasn't untouchable. The Lexus sat crippled against the reinforced gate, her tires shredded flat, the engine wheezing like a dying animal. Dust settled around it in the early morning sun, curling in the air like smoke after a battle. Karen Dalton stood beside her car, heels sinking into the dirt, chest heaving with fury and panic. Her pearl necklace caught the sunlight, out of place against the desolation of my pasture. She looked less like the queen of a suburban HOA and more like a stranded trespasser who had wandered too far into a land that wasn't hers. "This is criminal," she screamed, pointing at the ruined road. "You can't do this to me. I'll sue you. I walked closer, boots crunching in rhythm, the shotgun slung across my shoulder. The dogs paced at my sides, silent but watchful, their ears forward, eyes fixed on her like she was no different than a coyote caught too close to the herd. "Karen," I said evenly, voice carrying over the stillness, "you've been warned. Time and time again. You think this land is yours to cut through, like it's some shortcut between the grocery store and your committee meetings. But out here," I gestured wide, to the rolling hills, the barbed wire fences, the sweat-soaked earth out here, "things work differently." She shook her head violently, her blonde curls bouncing, her lips painted in anger. "This is America. You can't just set death traps for people. That's insane." "Funny," I replied, stepping close enough to see the tremor in her hands, "I didn't set a trap for people. I set it for trespassers. You just happened to be the only one foolish enough to step into it." Her bravado faltered. The fire in her eyes flickered as fear seeped through. She bent to snatch her phone from the dirt, fumbling with it as her fingers slipped across the cracked screen. I leaned down, plucked it from the ground before she could dial, and slipped it into my pocket. "That won't help you here." She froze, staring at me as though I'd ripped away her last shield. For the first time, the queen of the HOA looked small, just a woman far out of her depth. "You're crazy," she whispered, voice cracking. "No," I said. "I'm a man tired of being run over. Literally." The silence stretched long, broken only by the faint ping of cooling metal from her ruined car. The morning air hung heavy, full of dust and judgment. Finally, she swallowed hard. "What do you want?" I studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the gate. "Every time you've plowed through, I've had to fix it. 3 gates in 3 months. Steel, concrete, time I'll never get back. You think you're untouchable because you sit at the head of some suburban board table, waving fines and letters at people. But you don't get to do that here. Not on my land." Her lips pressed tight, but she didn't argue. "You're going to pay for every cent of damage," I continued, voice steady, deliberate. "The gates, the posts, the gravel I had to replace. Every hour of labor. And you're going to swear on whatever it is you actually believe in that you'll never set foot on this ranch again." She scoffed, trying to revive her arrogance. "And if I don't?" I shifted the shotgun on my shoulder. Not menacing, not raised, but the weight of it spoke louder than words. The dogs growled low, as if echoing the sentiment. Her chin wavered. She looked around, as though the HOA board might suddenly appear from the tree line to defend her, as though suburban bylaws carried any weight here in the wide, empty stretch of Texas pasture. No cavalry came. Her shoulders slumped. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll pay. Say it like you mean it." Her eyes brimmed with anger, humiliation burning hotter than the Texas sun overhead. But she nodded, voice trembling. "I'll pay. I'll never come back. I swear." For a long moment, I just stared at her, searching her face for the lie. She was a woman used to bending people to her will with threats and paperwork. But here, on this dirt road with her car gutted and her voice stripped of power, there was no pretense left. I believed her. I took a step back, giving her space. "Good. You'll have your car towed. You'll send me the money. And then we're done." Her eyes darted to her Lexus, slouched low on its rims like a carcass picked clean. She looked back at me, but whatever words she wanted to spit died in her throat. She knew. She knew the game had changed. I turned and walked back toward the porch, the dogs padding along with me, their tails low but steady. I didn't look back. Didn't need to. By the time I reached the steps, I heard the sharp click of her car door, followed by the empty sound of her broken engine trying and failing to start. Her panicked curse carried across the pasture. The silence that followed was mine. The weeks that followed proved my instincts right. The Lexus disappeared from the field a few days later, hauled away on a flatbed, the sound of its scraping frame ringing like a victory bell. A plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox soon after, no return address, just a cashier's check inside. Enough to cover the gates, the steel, the labor, and then some. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the absence. The shortcut through my land grew over with grass again, the ruts fading, the dust settling. No more headlights cutting across the dawn. No more smug smiles behind tinted glass. The subdivision meetings went on without her, I heard. Her power, her voice, quieted. And out here, peace returned. One evening, weeks later, I stood by the reinforced gate, the sun dipping low behind the hills, casting everything in gold. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the faint smell of cedar and earth. The dogs lay at my feet, content and calm. I leaned against the steel post, watching the light fade, and thought about the line that gate represented. A line between right and wrong. Between arrogance and respect. Between taking what you want and earning what you've built. Karen Dalton had crossed that line one too many times. And out here, on this ranch, the land had a way of teaching lessons the law never could. She'd driven through my gate thinking she was untouchable. But she learned the hard way. On this land, justice doesn't come from a boardroom or a courthouse. It comes from the soil, the steel, and the hands of the man who won't be pushed anymore. And justice had found her.